What's up, everybody, and welcome to the latest TDN 100 update show brought to you by your friends at the Draft Network. I'm Kyle Krabs, joined by Joe Marino, Keith Sanchez, and Dre Harris, a couple of members of our scouting department, and we are looking forward to talking to each and every one of you about all of the movers and shakers, new faces, old faces that are making themselves at home in the TDN 100. We are getting ready to flip the calendar over to January, which means everybody else is embracing the idea of draft season. You're seeing teams every week in the NFL who are eliminated from playoff contention. No, it's always draft season at the Draft Network, and that's why we are excited to bring you our latest TDN 100. So without further ado, we're going to start this thing off by looking at some of the biggest risers and new faces that have made their way into the TDN 100 amongst players who were in the November edition. Our biggest riser is quarterback Kenny Pickett from Pitt, who I know we have a couple of guys who are going to be more than happy to pound the table for Kenny Pickett here a little later in the show. But Florida State defensive end Jermaine Johnson is up 33 spots from his 60th ranking in the November edition. Jamison Williams, wide receiver, Alabama, up 26 spots. He has taken over the wide receiver 1 position in the TDN 100 rankings. Tight end Trey McBride, Colorado State, 26 spots as well. He's another big riser. Kingsley Enagbare, defensive end from South Carolina. LSU offensive lineman Ed Ingram. Houston defensive end Logan Hall. UCLA running back Zach Charbonnet. And Connecticut defensive tackle Travis Jones. Those are the biggest risers for guys who were in this most recent update in November as well. Joe, I want to start with you with Jermaine Johnson. We're going to talk quarterbacks a little later in the show. As you did the deep dive on Jermaine Johnson's tape, and I know you came back with a glowing review, he got a first-round film eval for you in our regional scouting process. What was it in the deep dive of the film that really helped sell you on the leap that he's taken this year?
Yeah, he just never stopped making an impact when you watch this guy play. I mean, just making play after play against the run, making big-time pressures, coming away with big-time sacks late in football games. And for Jermaine Johnson, it was just always about having an expanded role and seeing what he could do with it. You know, at JUCO, he goes to Georgia for a couple of seasons where he's a rotational player. And when you dig into the tape, you see a lot of high-level stuff, but just in a limited amount of reps. And then, you know, he becomes the guy for that Florida State defense. And it became abundantly clear every time I watched Florida State that he was a high-impact player. And then you pop on the tape and you really take the deep dive, and you just see how natural he is at working his hands and getting off blocks. And he has great vision, just a great feel for the game, great angles. He's a good finisher. And just, you cannot deny that the impact that this guy made on a snap-to-snap basis. And he played like a first-rounder, and he got a first-round grade from me.
Yeah. You know, Dre, I know Trey McBride was somebody who, you know, kind of lingered around the 100 cutoff. He wasn't ranked in our summer scouting, ended up 92nd in October, and then in November was up to 82nd. And he checked in relatively high for a lot of guys on our team. And I know for you, he came in with a top 50 ranking on your personal ballot for the latest TDN 100. So when you looked at Trey McBride and what he brings to the table, what impressed you the most about his game that has allowed him to kind of almost attack this tight end 1 opportunity that's kind of out in the open?
Yeah, I think that when you see Trey McBride, he may be the most athletic of all the tight ends in the entire draft. He's a very good all-around athlete. He can run. He's got straight line speed. But I think the thing that really separates him is his versatility. He's someone you can align in the backfield to play fullback. You can play him at H. You can play him at wing. He's really best served playing F. I mean, but the ability that he has and the number of things that he can do for an offense has really thrust him into the conversation where he currently is.
Keith, as far as a riser for you, I'm actually going to go off the board. Want to get some of the new faces that were unranked in November. And there's a name here that I really would love for you to amplify for everybody. So the highest ranking unranked player from November is Georgia defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. But Cincinnati linebacker Darian Beavers, Washington cornerback Kyler Gordon, Iowa State wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson, Kentucky defensive end Josh Pascal, and Keith, the guy I want you to talk about, LSU linebacker Damon Clark. are all guys who were unranked in November who have made a big leap up into the top 100. So Damon Clark, you obviously have a good familiarity with based on your time with the program at LSU. What's been the biggest difference for him this season as compared to last year?
Right. When you compare him to the guys that when, they had a chance to go to the draft last year and go through the whole process, but they decided to come back and, continue to work on their craft. He's a guy that made himself a lot of money. Last year, he was probably an undrafted guy. And this year, I think I gave him a 3rd-round grade. And that's because when you cut on the film, you really see him able to key and diagnose. He plays downhill well. He runs all over the field. He's a sideline to sideline guy. I think his athleticism jumps off the screen to people when they watch him. So I think he's a guy that, like I said, made himself a lot of money. He also showed the versatility this year to play some outside linebacker. You see him line up on the line of scrimmage. He's able to dip the shoulder, get around the corner, and get the sack to the quarterback. So I think this is a guy that finished with over 100 tackles and 5 sacks as a linebacker, which is unmatched, which is unheard of. And when you think about guys like Michael Parsons who do similar things in space, rush the passer, and also play that linebacker position, this is a guy that made himself a lot of money, and he was very exciting to watch. And like I always say, man, go Tigers.
I'm going to keep it in the SEC for another riser off the board as well. Another guy who's made himself a lot of money, and that's Kentucky defensive lineman Josh Pascal, who was really, really fun to watch. Keith, you talked about Damon Clark and him flipping that switch, right? Pascal was a guy I watched on tape in 2020. It's like, okay, he's built big. He's got all the traits. Doesn't really play to it, though. Kind of underwhelmed. Doesn't get off blocks. Well, somebody lit a fire into this guy's butt this past offseason because he was a totally different animal. He played physical. He played powerful. We talk a lot about power rushers who are capable of reducing angles for themselves and, minimizing the amount of tilt and turn that they have to get when they're rushing the passer to get home to the quarterback. Pascal's got those heavy hands, a lot of length, prototypical length, but he's also really effective against the run too. And I thought his anticipation was an area that he really improved at this year. So Josh Pascal, ranking one spot above Damon Clark, those guys 74th and 75th in the new TDN 100, and 2 fresh faces. But this is risers and fallers. This is not just guys who are making appearances or moving their way up the board. Those who come up, thus means there's guys who are on the way down. And I look at some of the biggest fallers who were included in this December update. Penn State linebacker Brandon Smith was a big faller, down 58 spots. Oregon cornerback Mykael Wright down 53 spots. Ohio State defensive end Zach Harrison, Kentucky offensive lineman Darian Kennard, Oregon safety Verone McKinley, Georgia cornerback Darian Kendrick, Washington offensive tackle Jackson Kirkland. These are some of our biggest fallers. Dre, I would love for you to give a little insight as far as either one of these 2 Oregon DBs, Verone McKinley, Mykael Wright, whichever one, you think surprised you more to see when you did the deep dive into their film, because these are guys you've done the full evaluation on, that maybe didn't show you when you watched all of the games and every play versus when you watched them on a week-to-week basis and they flashed on TV.
Sure, I think you start with Mykael Wright, man. I mean, he had a great year in 2020. He showed very good production, against the pass. He also made a tremendous impact in the kicking game as well. But I think the thing about him is he's really light and he's frail, and I think that makes him, for my eval, I think it makes him more of a predominantly player on the inside. I don't think he has true outside flex. And when you think about guys who are good inside, like, you typically don't draft those guys on day one. I mean, unless they're exceptional. Wow. So he had a great year, and he does an outstanding job of being able to make plays in the passing game. But for me, he's exclusively a slot player, which puts him somewhere around 2nd or 3rd round.
Now, Keith, for you, the guy that I want to ask you about that did fall and lose ground wasn't a guy who was amongst the biggest fallers, but has been a name that's generally been perceived to be a top 6, top 8 prospect throughout the course of this entire process. And that's Evan Neal to this point in time. And Evan Neal was somebody who's been mocked a lot in the top 5, and a guy that Joe's been pounding the table for, Ikem Ekwonu, at least for us, has kind of popped and flashed and is challenging him for OT1. And when you came back and did your presentation of Evan Neal, it wasn't this rosy, glowing report that you would assume with a guy who's been so frequently mocked in that area of mock draft. So talk to us a little bit about Evan Neal, his performance this season that you've seen, and what concerns you have that, maybe he can do his part to change in the college football playoff to reinvigorate our enthusiasm for him a little bit.
All right. So Evan Neal is a supremely talented athlete. And you see him, he's a great linear guy. So everything that he has to move forward with and is being a road grader and moving guys off the line of scrimmage, and he's able to get that big 6'6", 350-pound frame moving forward. He's great in that. But on the opposite side, when he has to move laterally, you see the issues. Him being able to redirect and match and mirror guys when they have counter moves and things of that nature, you see him struggle. So my issue was on the next level when he goes against those elite athletes and those guys that can convert speed to power and have exceptional counter moves, will this guy struggle? So I think he's still a good player, but I think after watching the evaluation, I would have to say he's slightly overrated. It's somebody that I wouldn't feel comfortable drafting in that top 5, but maybe when I get to the 20s range and I need a guy just to kind of plug and play, he will be there for me to select for sure.
So we've gone through risers, we've gone through fallers. It's not a conversation about the NFL draft without talking about some quarterbacks. So we're going to shift our focus to the quarterbacks. And here are your updated TDN 100 quarterback rankings. And this was fun in November because I think everybody on this call had a different QB1 at that point in the process. Things have clarified themselves at least a little bit. Pitt quarterback Kenny Pickett is QB1 in the latest update of TDN 100, checking in at number 18 overall. Mississippi quarterback Matt Corral is QB2, 25th overall. Cincinnati quarterback Desmond Ridder, QB3 at number 32 overall, so 3 quarterbacks in the top 32. North Carolina quarterback Sam Howell, number 4 at 39 overall. Nevada quarterback Carson Strong, 40th overall, 1 spot behind Sam Howell. And the last quarterback, QB6, Malik Willis, Liberty, 45th overall. So this is a very congested group still and a lot of different skill sets amongst them. But Joe, I'm going to give Kenny Pickett to you first and foremost. Let's start this conversation here. You came back from the eval on him and said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like he's something that he's not. What did you mean by that when you said it to our group, and what kind of context can you give everybody else as far as what you did see on tape?
Yeah, the challenging thing with Kenny Pickett is that he's such an established player, or he was an established player going into this season. And when I watched him in the past, and I'm well acquainted with Kenny Pickett, watching him really dating back to like 2017 at Pitt, it's hard to foil what you saw in the past against what you saw this year, because what you saw this year was pretty much unlike the player that he was in his first, 3 seasons at Pitt. But the player he was this year is a player that I feel very comfortable with in terms of, if I'm a team that needs a quarterback and I have a sound infrastructure in place, I would like to get my hands on a guy like Kenny Pickett. Had arguably the best season an ACC quarterback has ever had, and he just had so much comfort and command running that Pitt offense. And we're talking about a situation where it's not like Pitt had this big influx of talent or they had a new coordinator or anything like that. It's the same offensive coordinator since 2019, a pretty modest supporting cast overall. And Kenny Pickett, he improved as a football player, and that's why Pitt had the success they did winning the ACC, and obviously Kenny Pickett being a Heisman Trophy finalist. I mean, he brings good size, mobility, he's accurate, he's poised, he's tough, he's a great leader, and I just appreciate the way he played this year. You could tell there was just a comfort there. A lot of these guys enter the NFL, and they struggle as rookies as they're continuing to work out the kinks in their game. I thought Kenny Pickett stayed in school and really was able to iron out a lot of those issues. And just the comfort he showed, I mean, his entire process is very coordinated. It's very synced up. You can just tell he's comfortable in the pocket. He's got very rhythmic feet, and his upper body's married to his lower body, and he's got clean mechanics, and he throws the football where he wants to. And he's got this gunslinger mentality, but I thought he did a really good job this year of kind of blending the right times to make those aggressive throws, but also just keeping the offense on schedule and taking what the defense gives him. And so he's got great leadership. He's got good size. He's athletic, right? I think that's something that kind of gets lost. I mean, He's a guy that can move and extend plays and win outside of structure. And so, I know that there's some things that people are going to want to talk about. He's going to turn 24 before his rookie season. He's got small hands. There's some questions left to be answered, but I don't think it's particularly close. Kenny Pickett had the best season of any draft-eligible quarterback, and he's got a really nice toolbox to go with what he showed on the field.
So I'm sitting here with my bingo card, waiting to see if you were going to leave any talking points for the rest of us on Kenny Pickett. And you got pretty darn close to filling out the whole card. So I want to give you credit there. You, sir, are the highest on Kenny Pickett, or highest of any quarterback. You had him 10th on your personal ballot overall. But Keith Sanchez was not far behind you. Keith had Kenny Pickett at number 11 on his respective rankings. So Keith, without re-exhausting some of Joe's talking points when you watched Kenny, because you came in and you were pretty quick to reaffirm Joe's opinion of Kenny when you had a chance to watch him. And obviously your rankings reflect that as well. What impressed you the most about Kenny this season?
Man, so I'm going to take my time and I'm going to steal one of Joe's lines about Kenny Pickett. He said that there are no cheap throws. Like this guy is throwing 15-yard comebacks. He's throwing 15-yard in routes, and everything is on time. So this is a guy that he's not playing in the system that is trying to protect him and protect his arm. He's asked to push the ball down the field. He does, and everything in his route progressions. And when he's reading the defense, it's 1, 2, 3, get rid of it. 1, 2, 3, get rid of it. 1, 2. So everything is rhythmic, and that's what I like most about him. Like Joe said, man, this guy is extremely composed in the pocket, and it's not a sexy pick. Nobody was expecting to like Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh, but man, when you cut on the film, it's like, you know what? Man, I have to tip my hat and salute this guy. He's the best quarterback.
So he is, according to our ranks, the best quarterback in red hot. He's up 37 spots from his previous edition. But the other big riser was Nevada quarterback Carson Strong, who's up 13 spots in the rankings from our latest edition. He's up to 40th overall from 53. And Dre, you had a chance probably a week and a half or so ago to do the deep dive on Carson Strong's tape. And you came back and you had a lot of nice things to say. So there's been much that's been made and a buzz about the medicals and how his knee's going to check out. But when you're talking strictly on the field and with the tape, what did you see from Carson? And was there anything that surprised you that you saw of him based on what your expectations were based on summer study and live TV copy watches?
I think the thing about Carson Strong is that he's someone who has prototypical size. He stands tall and stands strong in the pocket. He has a strong arm. He's done an excellent job of taking care of the football this season. I think those are some of the things that you like about him. I mean, clearly he has the issue with his knee that further needs to be addressed. I do think that his lack of exceptional movement skills can hurt him in the National Football League because he doesn't have a ton of escapability. But this is someone who's big. He has a strong arm. He's a good decision maker with the football. He can get the ball wherever he needs to on the field, from short to intermediate to deep balls. And I think that those are the things that evaluators are going to like about his game going into the spring.
I had a joked with you guys when we did his presentation that he was a pain in the butt to watch strictly for the fact that he changed things at the line of scrimmage twice before he would actually take the snap. So you got a chance to get a good impression of just how much control he has at the line of scrimmage and making adjustments pre-snap and making sure he's getting the offense in the right play. And that is undoubtedly going to help move the needle for him if he impresses in the interviews and showcases that football intelligence. But I wanted to talk about a guy who's kind of the polar opposite of Carson Strong, and his offense is the polar opposite in the fact that there's no easy throw, or it's the same in that there's no easy throws for Malik Willis and Liberty, who I just finished watching this weekend. And I wish his offense would have given him some easy throws to work with, because so many times in Liberty, they're trying to run guys down the field and really relying on Malik Willis's athletic ability, which is his strongest trait by far, to create plays for him. And for every play that makes your jaw drop, there's another play in which you just really wish you would have seen or anticipated free runners in the secondary and guys open downfield and keeping his eyes downfield, or some inexplicable misses. But this is a guy I'm going to have a really hard time getting all the way out on because he does have the tools and the traits. And we've seen quarterback environment is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. And I think about what Trey Lance showed before he got drafted number 3 overall last year. And I think about Jordan Love at Utah State and him still managing to be a first-round pick to the Green Bay Packers. And we don't really know how that story is ending out yet, but I do appreciate the fact that he's a guy who hasn't been rushed into playing and has gotten the chance to mature at the pro game behind Aaron Rodgers. And I think if you could take Malik Willis and you can put him in an environment like that, where there's no pressure to start early, it's going to be really fascinating to see what his end result is because it's so blatantly obvious. Kenny Pickett had the best season, right? Carson Strong might be the most advanced mentally. Malik Willis is the most physically gifted out of all these guys. It's just a question of being able to put it together. And it's really hard to value him as a player. So while we're talking quarterbacks, I would love to kind of get anybody else's thoughts on quarterback development, how to compartmentalize a player in an environment versus projecting him to the next level. And Joe, I'd love to start with you because you have experience of this firsthand with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So challenges of a quarterback playing in a subpar environment, very clearly being a physically gifted player. What have your experiences been in watching that quarterback development be firsthand for a team that you pay very close attention to?
Yeah, if you'd have told me 5 years ago Josh Allen would be where he's at as a football player, I would have questioned. I would have very much questioned that. And he struggled a lot at Wyoming. He really struggled against top competition. I mean, everybody thinks about the Nebraska game, the Iowa game, repeating the same mistakes, just really struggling. But inside of those struggles was a really gifted football player in terms of size, athleticism, and arm talent. I mean, just the physical gifts alone gave him a chance to do a lot of different things, right? Those traits give you opportunities on the field. They give you options. They allow you to do things that maybe other quarterbacks can't do. And the rules of playing the position just don't necessarily apply to you because you just have so much physical gifts. And then the Bills brought him in and they did such a good job of building around him. And I thought what they really succeeded at was giving him veteran receivers and veteran offensive linemen. So you didn't have this developing quarterback around a developing infrastructure, both in terms of the blocking up front and the receivers. And so they go out and get a John Brown and a Cole Beasley and sign a bunch of veteran offensive linemen like Mitch Morse and John Feliciano. And that allowed Josh Allen to not have to deal with the inconsistency of young players around him. And they were able to isolate the variable Josh Allen and allow him to develop. And I don't think he was meant to play as early as he did. Obviously, Nathan Peterman played at such a bad level, they had no choice but to put Josh Allen in. And for Josh, it was good for him to kind of fail forward early on, take his lumps, and get himself to the point where he's just a really dynamic football player. And so you can't underestimate how important Josh Allen's mindset is and his physical gifts are, but also just what the Bills did to give him the right opportunity to become the best version of himself. And every year there's more and more on his plate, and he just keeps rising to the occasion and has really entrenched himself as the Bills quarterback. He's got a big contract, and I think everyone feels really good about his trajectory as a football player, but it's the entire process that went into Josh Allen. It's not just the gifts that he has, it's what Buffalo did around him from a personnel perspective, but also very fortunate to have the same coaching staff, right? Brian Daboll's been his offensive coordinator since he's been in the league, and they've all grown together, and it looks really good for the Bills in the quarterback position right now.
So, Joe, I learned from our last exchange, I'm not going to ask anybody else about Josh Allen, so you could have filled the whole bingo card up if you wanted to. Keith, I'm coming to you next, and then Dre, I'm going to come to you. Keith, you got a chance to see firsthand the development of a quarterback at the college level with Joe Burrow and what he was when he first got to LSU from Ohio State and what he was his first year as a starter versus his second year as a starter, which obviously set the path for him to win the Heisman and a national championship and go number 1 overall in the draft. So from an LSU perspective and a quarterback development perspective with Joe Burrow, what was like the biggest theme for Joe and the program on how they were able to create that massive leap in play?
I think first of all, and this is for any organization and you have to understand who your quarterback is. The first year, we was in a pro style offense that was play action and push the ball 40, 50 yards down the field in single coverage. And that wasn't Joe's game. Obviously, everybody knows we brought Joe Brady over and we kind of spread things out. Joe is an extremely cerebral guy. He's a smart guy, very intelligent. And when you can kind of simplify things by spreading everything out, he's able to read coverages. He has enough arm strength to just get the ball there. And I think that's where you're seeing the most progression. We always talk about this. Put your quarterback in the best situation. The offensive coordinator cannot override what the quarterback's talents are, what his natural God-given ability is. And I think that was the biggest thing with Joe Burrow. We spread everything out. Obviously, we had great weapons in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, right? That makes everything a whole lot easier. But we played to what Joe's strengths were, and that was spreading everything out, dinking, dunking the football, able to see one-on-one things, able to work the middle of the field in a more complete way. So I think that's where you see Joe able to take the next step, and I think that needs to be the model for every quarterback, head coach, GM marriage, that you have to, when you draft this guy, you have to see exactly what does he do well and what he doesn't do well. Prime example being Jalen Hurts with the Eagles, right? We all thought about, okay, man, hey, Jalen Hurts can be a really good football player, but he has to go to the right situation. And hats off to Nick Sirianni, because he changed his offensive philosophy coming from the coach, and he has Jalen Hurts now, and he's doing things that fits what Jalen Hurts does best. And I think that's why you're seeing Jalen Hurts have success at the level that they have, and the Eagles are knocking on the door of being a playoff team.
And Dre, I want to finish with you. You've spent more time in the league than anybody else on this call. So quarterback development in your experience, what are some of the most important talking points in kind of getting aligned and ready to execute that? And any examples that, you've been a part of or you've seen up close and personal?
I think it's a different beast, man. Like when you're evaluating for a team, because you're able to see what kind of offense you run. And not every quarterback throughout this draft is going to be able to fit every offense for every individual team, right? So it helps to be able to identify a philosophy that you want to run on the offensive side of the ball. And then too, it helps to have a foundation of size, arm talent, being a quick processor, playing the game from the shoulders up. Does he take care of the football? So I think that those things all come into play. It really helps when you have a foundation, though, of size, of arm strength, of being able to move and be able to escape pressure. I think that those things really help you and give you a chance to play in a lot of different types of offenses. But I would certainly say that it really helps seeing if a particular player is able to fit your team and your offensive philosophy.
And part of building around a quarterback is the supporting cast around them. And we're going to switch gears here and talk about some of those supporting cast players, starting with wide receivers. This is a good group this year, and we have 13 wide receivers that are gracing the December edition of the TDN 100, including a new wide receiver one who was unranked in our summer rankings. Alabama wide receiver Jameson Williams is coming in at number 12 overall. This is a big leap for him. Chris Olave, wide receiver Ohio State, wide receiver 2 at number 15 overall. Traylon Burks from Arkansas at 24. Drake London from USC at 28 overall. Directly behind him, Jahan Dotson from Penn State at 29, and directly behind him, Ohio State's Garrett Wilson at 30th overall. Alabama's John Mechie III at 36, Purdue's David Bell at 43, Georgia's George Pickens at 47, Kentucky's Wan'Dale Robinson at 72, Iowa State's Xavier Hutchinson at 73, Cincinnati's Alec Pierce at 78, and UCLA's Kyle Phillips at 96. Keith, this one's coming to you. Jameson Williams being wide receiver 1 is a very big deal because Chris Olave has held this post for us going back to the summer. Jameson Williams, a former teammate of Chris Olave before transferring to Alabama, as if they don't already have enough wide receiver talent there in Columbus. So Jameson Williams, talk about his impact for this Alabama passing offense, especially now that John Mechie's not going to be playing in the college football playoff.
Right. I think his impact is is unmatched. You're talking about a wide receiver core that didn't have much experience coming into the season, and they were looking for that number one guy. And I think from game one, Jameson Williams stepped up and he fit the bill. This is an explosive guy that can take the top off of any defense. He's great at running intermediate and short routes, securing the passes, and he's a true threat with the ball in his hands. So he's a guy that you can throw screens to, and he can take it 80, 90 yards to the house. He has great start ability, short area quickness. He can make defenders miss in space. He's just a great player overall. So I think that this guy was able to accelerate to the number one wide receiver position because he has all of those traits. And we're used to Alabama having top wide receivers. We were just trying to see who was it going to be this year? Was it Jameson Williams or John Mechie? But credit to Jameson Williams. I think he stepped up. He wanted to be the number one guy, and he showed why he is the number one guy throughout the season. I think you see him against Georgia. He made top plays that changed the game, and you really seen the Georgia defense struggle to corral him and keep him under wraps, and was a big reason why Alabama was able to blow the doors off of that Georgia defense.
So, Jill, I want to ask you about a guy that's not necessarily at the top of this list. He's closer to the bottom, but he's a guy who's a brand new face for us, and he's going to be participating in the All-Star circuit at the end of next month, and that's Cincinnati's Alec Pierce. Obviously, we've been watching Desmond Ridder and seeing how he sees the opportunities that 2021 presented, but Alec Pierce is a name who's been a beneficiary of Desmond Ridder's play. What impressed you the most about his game?
Yeah, I like Alec Pierce and excited to see him in the college football playoffs as well as obviously the Senior Bowl. And I don't always love the comps that I come up with for prospects, but this is one that I really like. And I comped Alec Pierce to Michael Pittman Jr. out of USC, where I think just athletically they're very similar. They're built very similarly, and they win in similar ways. I mean, good size, good speed, good hands, really good ball skills, really good body control, super tough and competitive. And they're just those types of players where the game slows down for them at the catch point and they seemingly catch everything. You know, I don't give that label very easily, but I think Alec Pierce deserves that in terms of the types of catches he can make in traffic and in contested situation and expanding his catch radius. And I fear that everything that I just said is going to make everyone think that he's not a good route runner or he can't separate. No, he can. He's a good route runner. He's very explosive. He's a good accelerator, and he's deceptive with how he works in and out of his breaks. And so I think this is one of those guys that profiles as an X receiver. You can play him in the slot and give yourself a big slot type player, but just I think Michael Pittman just kind of really paints the right picture here. If you remember him at USC and you see the ways that he wins for the Colts now, becoming one of the better receivers in the game, I think that's kind of a really nice arc for him and a very good stylistic comparison. And so I'm anxious to see him against Alabama, and I can't wait to see him at the Senior Bowl.
It's funny you mention USC wide receivers because, Dre, I would love to hear your thoughts on Drake London, obviously, who got hurt this season and missed about the last month of the year, but was on a torrid pace before he got hurt. And Joe's bringing up this name, Michael Pittman. You know, what is the role that Drake London has played in the Trojans offense versus what Pittman did? And how do you compare those two as players?
Drake is a significantly better athlete than Pittman, man. I think Drake London is a true X. He's athletic. He's got good catch range at 6'5", but he's also someone who has surprisingly good run after the catch skills when he gets the football, which isn't really common for a bigger guy, right? But Drake does so many things well. He's excellent in 50-50 balls. He's exceptional in the red zone with regards to like slants and fades. I mean, there are several aspects to his game that translate well to the National Football League. It's really unfortunate that he had to end the season hurt because he was on a historic pace, man. I mean, and as the primary offensive weapon on that team, man, he was exceptional. He made a ton of big plays. I think he's got the most upside, if healthy, out of probably all of the receivers in top five, with maybe the exception of Jameson Williams.
Keith, I wanted to come back to you for a really surprising name for us that you were very staunchly pounding the table for when you did your film evaluation, and that's Iowa State's Xavier Hutchinson, who checked in at 25 for you on your TDN 100 ballot. And you came in with this glowing review of him as a player. So talk to us a little bit about Xavier Hutchinson. And this is a player who hasn't been on our radar from a top 100 perspective until he got put under the microscope. And Iowa State had a successful season, but maybe not to the hopes and aspirations based on where they were ranked in the preseason. So how much of the Iowa State success that they did have was in part by Xavier Hutchinson?
Yeah, I think this guy's maybe one of the most underrated players in this whole draft process period. And I'll be excited to see how he elevates throughout the draft process. Because for me, I went into the film watching, thinking that this is an Iowa State receiver, check him out, see how he feel. And I was expecting to get fall somewhere in the third, fourth round. But when you watch this guy's specific skill set and his athletic traits, they jump off the film to you. I gave the guy a second round grade, and that's because I think that he competes with those guys such as Treylon Burks, David Bell from Purdue. This guy has a wide catch radius. You see him contort his body to adjust to different passes. He's an explosive guy off the line of scrimmage. He can take the top off the defense, and he's also a big body guy. So we have a draft class where we have a lot of small guys. We have a lot of 5'10", 5'11", 185, 190-pound wide receivers. It's not that many true X wide receivers that we have, and I think this guy can do that. He showed the ability to get off press coverage and beat the cornerback quickly at the line of scrimmage, stack him, and then, like I said, get down the field vertical. And like the special thing about him is his contested catch. When cornerbacks are draped on top of him, he showed the ability to locate the ball, turn his body, go up, catch it at the catch point, and secure the pass. So this guy really reminded me of Keenan Allen. I thought of Keenan Allen when I watched this guy, just the ability to get open and just secure the pass. So I'm really excited about this guy, and I'm really excited about everybody else to find out about this guy for sure.
I would be remiss if we're talking wide receivers to not give at least a little bit of love to Purdue's David Bell, who reminds me of Rashad Bateman from last year, who ended up going in the first round to the Baltimore Ravens. Also reminded me a little bit of Michael Gallup, who perhaps is the best wide receiver 3 in the NFL when you consider he's got CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper catching passes for Dak Prescott as well. Really refined as a route runner, strong hands. And Keith, I see him in the same light as a guy who can be a true X receiver and win against press on the line of scrimmage, and really refined in his route running. Super productive, just short of 3,000 yards in 3 seasons. But the guys who are catching passes have to also deal with the guys who are covering them on the other side of the ball. And that's where we want to spend our last bit of time here on this TDN 100 update show by talking about a really good corner class. We mentioned 13 wide receivers in the top 100. There's 14 corners in the top 100. So for every bit of depth and talent on that side of the ball, this side of the ball's got it too. So let's go through with the guys who made the list and then some new names that we want to talk about. Starting with Derek Stingley Jr., LSU corner, no surprise here, number 4 overall. Andrew Booth Jr., Clemson corner, number 6 overall. Bit of a drop, but Ahmad Garner from Cincinnati has routinely been a guy for us in the top 20. He's still there, but on the fringe of it. He is CB3 in this update, followed by Auburn's Roger McCreary at 21. Florida's Kaiir Elam at 31. Trent McDuffie, Washington corner at 33. Kyler Gordon, the other Washington corner at 65. Mississippi State's Martin Emerson at 71. Tennessee's Alante Taylor at 83. Darion Kendrick from Georgia at 84. Cincinnati's Kobe Bryant, the other Cincinnati corner, at 87. Oregon's Mykael Wright at 89. Clemson's Mario Goodrich, the other Clemson corner, at 93. And then Houston's Marcus Jones coming in at number 98 overall. And Joe, I'll defer to you. You can pick one of these two guys down here at the bottom, because you had glowing reviews for both Mario Goodrich and Marcus Jones for what they are as players. So which one would you like to tell the people about?
I won't do the classic Joe Marino and do both. I like them both. I like both these players, but Mario Goodrich from Clemson, man, he really popped for me on film. And, you know, you kind of went into the season with this Clemson secondary and the cornerback situation, and you knew Darion Kendrick was going to be gone. You knew Andrew Booth was going to be that top guy, but who was going to be that guy opposite of Andrew Booth? Was it going to be Sheridan Jones or Mario Goodrich? Well, it was Mario Goodrich, and he claimed that job, and he played high-level football. I mean, a kind of a niche player for the first 3 seasons at Clemson, and then he became a first-team All-ACC player this year. He's got size, length, athleticism. Like him best as a press zone coverage at the next level. Super disruptive at the line of scrimmage. When he plays in press, he'll crowd the release and create jams and cap routes right away. I love his processing in zone coverage, stays leveraged, spaces the field well, reads the backfield. Oh my gosh, this guy plays the run. Me and Dre will fight a little bit about cornerbacks and tackling and stuff like that, but this guy really takes run defense seriously. He takes on blocks, he tackles, he's physical, and he's going to make your run defense better. And I just love his temperament, his competitive toughness. The ball production doesn't pop like in terms of volume, but when you consider that he's only been targeted 83 times in coverage and has 14 pass breakups and 4 interceptions, I mean, that's a really good amount of ball production given the amount of targets that has went his way. And so it's only a 1-year starter. You want to see him have more time on task. And, I'm not sure he's a plug and play guy, but by year 2, maybe year 3 at the latest, I think this guy has a chance to be a high quality starter that is an ascending talent that just had a sensational year for that Clemson Tigers defense.
Dre, I wanted to ask you about a guy who's making an appearance in the top 32, and this has been a player who's had a pretty steady ascension for us throughout the course of the season, and that's Auburn's Roger McCreary. He was unranked in the summer, 59th come October, 37th in November. Now he's up to 21st and challenging for the CB3 spot behind Stingley and Booth. So amid a season for Auburn that probably didn't go to expectations, and you look at the depth chart and you clearly see they have a lot of talent there. Well, how did Roger McCreary do with his 111th on any given Saturday?
There are a few things that popped out about his game for me. This is someone who I call ball hungry. He is eager to get his hands on the football, and for me, I've always judged corners based off the amount and the effectiveness in which they've gotten their hands on the football, especially to create turnovers. I mean, but he's got a lot of ball production, and I think he's had close to 30 pass breakups in the last 3 years in the SEC. He's got really good size. He's 6 foot. I mean, I think his skill set says he can play outside and inside, which gives him true flexibility, in my opinion. And there's just a ton of things that you really like about the player. He's competitive at the catch point. He can play man. He can play zone. I wish he was a little bit more effective as a rerouter at the line of scrimmage in press. But this is someone who has the talent, who has the production, who has the size and length to do a lot of different things. And it would not surprise me if he continued to ascend throughout this draft process.
Speaking of size and length, Keith, wanted to ask you about Martin Emerson, who's a guy that you had a chance to get eyes on last week, and was an interesting evaluation when you consider his traits and his strengths versus some of the ways you might not want to implement him as a player. So what were your impressions on Emerson as a player who's kind of been generally perceived as a tier 2, tier 3 corner in this year's class that stood out the most to you?
All right, I think the biggest trait that stood out to me was his extreme size. This guy is extremely long. He's 6'2", and he's 200 pounds. So he's a guy, when he gets on the line of scrimmage and he's able to really get his hands on you, he can just distract the receiver. He can collapse them. He can almost smother them at the line of scrimmage, and he really just prevents them from getting into their route. So I think that was the best trait of Martin Emerson. Then when you talk about Martin Emerson playing in space, he plays in a zone defense at Mississippi State, and they always have their eyes on the quarterback and the receiver. His back is always to the sideline, so he's a guy that keeps everything in front of him. So in space, he's a pretty good player. You would like his reactionary athleticism to be a little bit better, but I think he should be primarily a zone defender. I question his reactionary athleticism and man-to-man defense. He was a little bit grabby at the top of routes, and I know in the NFL those things will be called a lot, but I think he'd be a good player, a guy that can be in a cover 3 zone defense. We've seen guys like this thrive. When you talk about a Richard Sherman, Richard Sherman was not a great athlete, but he was put in that same position. He made plays. So I think Martin Emerson will be an intriguing guy for defensive coordinators and GMs that like these long, athletic, big corners. And I'll be excited to see what he does in the NFL.
So Joe, I got good news for you. We're about 6 weeks into this process, and I feel like Will Smith in that Fresh Prince meme where he's standing in the room all by himself, because that's all the corners that I've had to evaluate in my neck of the woods. So instead of have somebody to talk about, I'm going to let you talk about Marcus Jones a little bit here as we bring this thing to a close. So go ahead, get on the soapbox, tell everybody about one of your favorite fun players from film study thus far in our process in Marcus Jones.
Yeah, Marcus Jones is a baller. Alabama kid. He went to Troy initially, transferred to Houston after a couple of seasons. And I just think the best word that you can use to describe Marcus Jones is that he's a playmaker. Tremendous athlete, exceptionally quick, elite speed, fluid hips. And you get this guy in man coverage from the slot, man, he's going to match patterns. He can carry guys down the field. Extremely physical, extremely aggressive. He plays the ball. He loves to tackle. And, look, he's not like the biggest guy, but the way that this guy will come downhill and fit the run and blitz off the edge, I mean, he's really exciting. Then, oh, by the way, he's got game-breaking kick and punt return ability, 9 career return touchdowns, very secure handler of the football. And they give him some chances on offense to catch a football. There's just so many different ways that he can impact the game. If you get past the fact that this guy's not very tall or long, I mean, he can make a lot of plays. He can do a lot of things. You just have to overcome that size.
See, that was a lot more fun than me trying to fill in the blanks on some middle level, mid-tier guy. No Big Ten corners in the TDN 100 this time around. We'll see. Maybe the deep dive is going to bring somebody around, and I'll have somebody to talk about next time. But that, my friends, is going to do it for us here on the December reveal of the latest edition of the TDN 100 with Keith Sanchez, Dre Harris, Joe Marino. I'm Kyle Krabs. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Make sure you visit thedraftnetwork.com for all of your NFL, college football, and NFL draft needs. And come on back next time because we got a couple more of these coming, starting with the next one in January.